Hello, hello. Hi, Dmitry.
Uh,
So you said you're based in New York, right?
Yeah, I'm back in New York. Yeah, I
Okay.
was in California for the last 2 weeks, but I'm back in New York.
Okay. Sounds good. Hi, Dmitry.
Good morning.
So you said you're based in New York, right?
Yeah, I'm back in New York. Yeah, I was in California for the last 2 weeks, but I'm back in New York.
Okay. Sorry, that's the YouTube. Okay.
Uh,
That's why you heard it twice. Yeah, we're good. You can see my desktop. You can probably see the agenda.
mm-hmm,
Okay.
mm-hmm.
Wait, so if you were in California, you probably avoided some of the heat, the New
Yes,
York heat. Yeah.
yes,
Good.
yes. I was hanging out in various mountains and parks, and it was
Nice.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I did my PhD in Berkeley and spent a lot of time, mostly if I was outside, it was coastal hiking, coastal biking. I was
Mm-hmm.
in the Sierra. Well, I skied around Tahoe for sure, but 3 seasons it was usually coastal just because
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of just the Pacific. I've always liked the coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's nice. Yeah, one of my children is there.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other relatives. So we didn't go to Berkeley this time, but we were in San Francisco and
Yeah.
San Carlos
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Nice.
lot, and went to San Jose. We got some T-shirts from the Computer History Museum.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah, I haven't been I guess I flew into San Jose a few years ago. One of the guys on my dissertation committee was
Hmm.
turning 60, I guess. Yeah.
Mm,
But it was also a time when my younger one was going on college, looking at college trips. So we flew into San Jose. The party was in Santa Cruz on the beach. I mean, the whole
mm,
thing was on the beach, all the meals. I think there were some talks because it was astronomy, right? And then
mhm,
after that, we jumped on a plane and went down to Ontario and went to
mhm,
like Pitzer, did a little hiking around like Big Bear, and then to
mhm,
Occidental, and then of course, to Santa Monica. Yeah.
mm. Yes, yes. We've been to all these places. Yeah. No, the Computer History Museum is interesting. Yeah, well, they have all sorts of very old hardware that I used to work on many years ago.
Let me close that window. Sorry. Yeah. You mean like PDP-11 or before that?
No, no, older than that. They had, for example, Connection Machine, well, which is actually newer than PDP-11.
Right.
But yeah, there was a company called Thinking Machines, which
Right.
decided to put together, tens of thousands of Intel processors and build a highly parallel computer. And actually, the only language to program it in was a version of Lisp with parallel extensions.
Right.
So, so I used to program things like fast Fourier transform in Lisp on a highly parallel
Yeah.
machine. That was interesting, yeah. And that got abandoned many years ago. I was surprised they actually have it there. Yeah, it also had things like Cybers and Cray computers.
Right.
So, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know. I don't know it in that deep. I did take some computer history, or it was part of my a programming course in high school, and they were talking about how, at least in the U.S., a lot of it was driven by needing to calculate the census. That the U.S. government put a lot of money into that, and the development. I think the one of the UNIVACs or something was specifically because apportionment is so important in this country, like the electoral college and the whole
Mhm.
proportional representation thing. So, but
That was that was one of the drivers, but that was more like so for things like punch cards, how do you actually
Right.
count things? Yeah, because the last time they did it manually, it was extremely expensive, and it just wasn't practical anymore. That wasn't but that kind of that's not what drove things like high speed computing and parallelization. It was so that was interesting. Definitely worth checking out if you're in that area. Yeah, but mostly we hung out in things like parks. There's absolutely great hiking around San Jose.
Right. Good time of year. Good. Okay, well, let's give people a few minutes.
Let's get started. Yeah.
I want to see if people are having problems getting in. Somehow somebody joined next week's meeting.
Interesting. Well, if they can tell us about market performance from next week.
That's right. Yeah, there's that episode of The Twilight Zone, where old TV show from the 50s where the guy one day he gets a newspaper and it gives tomorrow's stock prices. So of course he invests and makes all this arbitrage money. And he keeps getting all these different current events. And then toward the end of the episode, he gets the newspaper and it has his obituary. So sometimes you don't want to know that, you don't want to know everything about the future. You don't want to know when you're going to die, or to see that written in the newspaper is not that bad. And then the other one like that is there was something that went the rounds of the Israeli folk festivals, and it's about a guy who's given not a week to live, not 2 months to live, but like 90 minutes to live by some smart Tel doctor or something like this. Unfortunately, he spends about half of those 90 minutes fighting with a police lady about a parking ticket. So there's an analogy somewhere there in what you should be doing with your life, I guess, as you get older. Okay, well, it's 8:05. Let me put this up. If it's just hoping other people will come up. I guess people will come in. Share something else. Share. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So then if I can. Sorry, it's already sharing the screen.
I can share the screen.
Yeah, so I wanted to put up, it said something about model governance. Still getting used to these new glasses. Okay, take this down. And now put this up. Yeah. Do I have to reshare? I probably have to reshare. No, it should be. Is it up there? Should be up there. Can you see my screen with the basis of model governance?
Yeah, it
Okay.
says governance.
Yeah, so I mean, in the agenda, we can go to this in a minute. I should say that I'm hopeful if people are out there on YouTube watching the live stream, that's fine too. So Dmitry and I are here, and anyone else coming into the meeting, we can talk. If it's just you and I, we can perhaps cut it shorter if we don't want to go past, say, the bottom of the hour. So first, just a little bit more thoughts about reverse stress testing, because we were talking about that last time. So I looked into it. I wrote a bit for the book. One of the things that I found was that in 2017, Basel said that there was sort of a split between, it's like regulatory capital versus economic capital, that the banks are following things like CCAR and the European equivalents, but that's basically just for reporting. They're not using the results of that so much because I guess they're too generic for their portfolios. So then we say in the book that, okay, so then they can have their own internal things. Maybe the Fed scenarios aren't realistic enough, but still it's not that specific because it's not Bayesian. It's not really asking what happens if there's another great financial crisis. And so then I thought that the way that a student would think about this would be if it's a reverse stress test, how much can we do in terms of early warning signs? If we have a target, an outcome, then what are the sensitivities we should be looking at, and what are the types of outcomes that are concerning? And then if we are going to try to hedge those, is it worth that to do that, and how effective would a hedge be? So I only wrote a page of text, but then I wrote or two, but then I started thinking, what are some very simple things? Like just imagine, for example, that somebody has a long stock position. I think I called the stock down
Mhm.
to say what direction it would be. And then it just basically it tanks. So what do? You could put a stop loss in, you could put it, and just have, so I think it would be heuristic, a learning experience of student just kind of visualizes, well, where does the stop loss kick in? So I create down, say I started at 100, but I put some noise on it so that the stop loss could be triggered somewhere. Um, Instead of the full, let's say 90 days or something, or whatever the capital T is, it goes to some small t like 10 days and it kicks it. So then, yeah, consideration of you may have missed some future upside and so on. Then I said a short position in cash. And then finally, it was cash itself being risky on the basis of inflation. You could hedge that with a tip or with an inflation cap or something. And then finally, a I think it's a long call position. Must be a long call because I had already talked about shorting um, and bringing in delta there. So that's, I don't know if there's any more. So those are kind of one or two asset portfolios. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, like any sort of, if you're teaching someone about reverse stress testing, like what's the kind of,
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking, if your book is kind of, generic, it's for students in a master's program,
yeah,
right?
let me see if I can put up the outline because the
Yeah,
outline is,
and a lot of them might end up, not working at a, GSIP, but might be working on a small institution
right,
or, even an institution that just tries to follow, industry best practices, but isn't necessarily regulated like a GSIP,
right.
right? And so they might have, you know, um, stress scenarios that are not necessarily tied to the capital markets. Okay, so a stress scenario might be something like like a RCSA. Uh, Actually, I'm not sure if my does my video work or not. I'm not sure because my phone
Well,
is
I mean,
not plugged in.
you could just
Yeah,
have a bank run, let's say,
yeah,
you could just,
yeah.
or
I would
something.
say yeah, bank run, but even scenarios like operational stress testing. I mean, operational stress testing is
Right.
kind of unappreciated, but uh, thinking, what can go wrong in yeah. So I think this whole reverse stress testing kind of unless you have some regulation saying it has to be like a totally
Right.
separate
It,
exercise, it's better to tie it into your risk identification
you're like
and
KRIs and stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the risk control self-assessment.
Right.
Yeah,
And
just
CSAs. Yeah. And
yeah,
the
yeah.
RCSA. Yeah.
Or RCSA, yes. So you should have, your whole, risk. Typically, people have this whole risk taxonomy, hierarchical.
Right.
These are level one, level two, and you want to see for each, basically, for each material risk, what can go wrong. So, for example, if you have a little startup, a kind of a stress you might want to think about is what if a bunch of key people leave,
Yeah.
right? And you hedge it is not by selling a bunch of stuff, but by having a good succession plan for key people.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't, well, we're a little more crude in New York. So we're like, someone walks across Broadway and gets hit by a bus, right?
Yeah, gets hit by a bus, or yeah. Well, most people try to be more kind of nice about this. I suppose somebody wins a lottery and doesn't want to work anymore.
What was that trip from Warsaw to, was it to Kyiv or something, where they put most of the Polish government on a plane? Uh, that
Uh,
wasn't great.
yeah, yeah, that was weird. But yeah, there was actually an interesting episode in IBM's history when they put a whole bunch of people responsible for the PC product on the same airplane that crashed, and that pretty much killed the IBM PC. They kind of sold what was left to a Chinese company, Lenovo.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't
Mhm.
realize that was that history.
Yeah, yes. I mean, so that's kind of why you don't let multiple key people to get on the same airplane in some companies.
Yeah, biz continuity, key person is. That's
Yeah.
that's interesting that the operate, because there is a chapter that we have on operational risk, and right now that's going through the Basel types. Martin
Mhm.
had said that his view or his understanding is those seven or so Basel types are going away, but I still think of
Yeah,
it, you know,
yeah.
yeah,
It's a good thing to talk about, but yeah, it sounds like yeah, they're trying to standardize on basically the standard model. Yeah,
right,
because previously lots of banks worked on internal models, and now kind of the regulatory community says, yeah, you can just throw away all that work.
right,
This was discussing absolutely. But then there's also, things like if you consider, for example, U.S. real estate before 2008.
right.
Uh, People kind of assumed that it's not possible for real estate in all parts of US to go down simultaneously. They literally had stress models where the assumption was, yeah, real estate might crash in Las Vegas or in Florida or in Arizona, but not all three at once.
Or the or you can bid it by the metric, what is it called? Metropolitan statistical areas that
Mhm.
or zip code. Yeah, yeah. Right.
Yeah, so it was kind of hard-coded that as long as you were sufficiently diversified in your, portfolio of mortgage derivatives, you could not possibly lose any
Right.
money. And then the kind of uh, it just happened differently in reality. And then, yeah, so I think it may be a good idea just for folks not to, focus too much on, market risk, but to
Right.
consider, uh, you know, different possible scenarios, all of which can be, to some extent mitigated, hedged. Yeah.
Right. Well, what
This is,
about, yeah,
Mhm.
like supposing if you have your KRIs, like do they ever, or let's say the key factors underlying your business. So that might be if you're a Silicon Valley bank, it might be the actions of depositors, it might be the actions of the Fed. But do banks ever formally form like a VCV of the factors so that, perhaps if you did that with these MSAs for real estate, you would start seeing that they were getting closer and closer to unity. And then
Mhm.
that would be a flag. I don't know if people monitor correlations. It's harder if you're not a statistician to think about that because people are used to thinking about stochastic processes in
Mhm.
terms of their mean and their standard deviation, but not in terms of their covariance, I think.
That is a very good question, actually, and it is related to stress testing. So, yeah, one of the kind of good practices is for risk people for second line to look for anomalous behavior in the
Right.
markets, other things. And what is anomalous behavior, right? So, well, obviously, if you have a VAR breach, down or up, it's probably anomalous, and you want to investigate what happened. And if a particular market factor moved by, let's say, three or more historical standard
Right. Right.
deviations, it's anomalous. But how do you see that correlations are breaking?
Right.
I actually don't have the answer to that. Maybe if it, ask it on the internet, because I've seen some interesting analysis using, Hotelling analytics, trying to see that, yeah, something happened which historical principal components didn't quite explain. But it's better than nothing, but I just don't know. Like, if you, for example, looking every day at real estate, filler index for a bunch of metropolitan areas, how would you see that the correlations have broken? I don't know.
Right.
It's a
And what's
difficult.
normal and what's a small perturbation and what's a secular change. Yeah.
Yeah, what's an animals? Yeah, but yes, this Hotelling stuff maybe is the best we can do. Um, Yeah, so in terms of stress testing, or things like your fundamental products change. So maybe for a stress test you want to consider a situation where you are selling a particular financial product, and let's say consumers discover something better.
Right.
Right. It's a bit like if you remember that disintermediation in the 70s and 80s, right? So banks were able to offer deposits at a particular rate that was capped by federal regulators, and then they discovered that they can put money elsewhere and get somewhat better rate on the deposits, so they massively withdrew the deposits. Right. That's did anybody have a stress test for that, or stress scenario? Kind of skeptical. Yeah, and
Right.
that puts a
Well,
lot of
I guess
institutions.
that's the thing with the Bayesian way of looking at it. You have, I guess, a finite number of priors, but a infinite number of outcomes. It's
Hmm.
easier from the Fed's perspective because I guess they think they have an infinite number of scenarios, but I guess that's conditioned by what they think is realistic, what
Hmm.
they've done in the past.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
guess that's I don't know whether call that out in the text, but if you do have these priors and things like that, there should be some understanding of, at least historically, what's important, what is more likely than others, I guess. Although, as you
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
the really thing you're worried about is the thing you haven't seen yet. But at least historically, it's much more likely that this compared to that. So that, in addition to the cost of the hedge and the cost of not hedging.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point, that you have to consider how likely a scenario is, because when you have let's say, limits on those scenarios,
Right.
so if you say, okay, I'm going to lose $1 billion under this scenario whose probability is 0.01, and I'm going to lose $1 billion under this scenario whose probability is 0.00001.
Yeah.
It's not right, right? You kind of have to have a bit more tolerance for things that you judge to be less likely. So having the same loss limit on various scenarios which are much less likely than others is not right. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good point.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, yeah, let's just, if you want to look at my screen here.
I can see it.
I don't know. I think both of us have probably spent a lot more time in things like validation than others.
Mhm.
But I still think it's important. Let's see. Can I these new glasses? It's just crazy. Is that it? Okay. That's not much bigger. Something like that. Okay. That looks bigger to me.
Uh-huh.
So you try to start with a joke. What do they say? In the US, you start a talk with a joke. In Japan, you start it with an apology. So I guess I'm sorry if this is not funny, but so like the Empire State Building or any other structure. So I'm seeing, well, I guess the first realization was that model governance is like a superset of model risk, in the sense that they should also be looking at usage and the building, the development. So like the construction workers. Did you know the Empire State Building was built during the Depression? And so like it went up in 31, I think, 1931. And so people sneered at it. They said it's the empty state building because nobody wanted to lease office space there. So it was thought of as a folly at the time, just something big that was useless. So and then the use, I mean, obviously the building inspectors and model risk people are important, but are there other model related areas or other areas over which governance? I'm trying to think. Mostly, as I said, I've been in validation, but I did spend some time at the end of my Natixis thing, 6 months in the governance area.
Mhm. Well, I I I would say, for a book, it's important to discuss, reporting. Like you want
Right.
to collect, KRIs on model usage, right? And so one example, for example, from ongoing performance monitoring. I mean, it is in a sense a part of model validation, because when you're doing validation, you want to see not only if the model itself kind of makes sense,
Right.
but all the infrastructure around it, like the plan to monitor the performance of the model, makes sense, right? And also documentation, because documentation, one of the reasons why there's actually a lot of attention paid to documentation in the SAR 11.7. Okay, and that is a key person risk, right? You kind of want to
Absolutely.
you don't want to have a situation where somebody writes a model and leaves, and then nobody understands what the heck
Yeah,
they did.
so I do mention further down, I think in things like the model development document versus the MVR. I think
Mhm.
the model development document, at least some of those people stay around. I think the bigger problem that I saw, especially at a second tier place like Jeffries, is that the model validation reports are written by consultants on a 6-month
Mhm.
contract. So then the
Mhm.
probability is zero that you can talk to one of them if you look at it a year or 2 years from now.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, which is why you have to force them, for the lots of money that they're being paid for,
Mm,
to write proper documentation. I mean, you should be able to look at model validation report and figure out what the model does. Yeah, but in the model documentation, like for example, one thing which SR 11.7 actually requires, and a lot of people don't pay attention to, is, let's say you take a particular approach to, let's say, pricing some exotic derivatives, and there are other approaches. You're actually supposed to explain, for each approach. So basically, the criterion should be if you're starting from scratch, you look at various possible approaches to pricing this.
right.
And for one, you should explain why you chose the one you're using and not others. And just citing the literature, I mean, if like, it's not acceptable to say, okay, I implemented the analytics in book X, and the book is like 700 pages.
Right.
It doesn't
Well,
have
that's
HTML.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing. It's the bibliography that often I see with these consultants, and then you can't find it. These are not real references. They're like it's almost like conversation with Trader on, June 10th, 2000 or something.
Yes, yes, yeah, but yeah, you got to manage those guys. I mean, the architecture, which in my experience, work best if you use consultants like EY or one of those. You
Yep.
definitely need to have a FTE at the bank supervising the consultants
Yep.
and kind of beating them up and making sure that they do what you want. Because if you let them if you let them work on their own, they will do kind of the minimum work, less than required, and not leave behind the artifacts like
Yeah, yeah. There were all sorts of issues I think I discussed maybe in the first meeting here. The kind of because last one we had was KPMG, but E&Y the same thing that you have 3 or 4 people working on similar
Mhm,
models that don't talk to each other.
mhm,
So then one will say something is a requirement of the
mhm.
MVR in 6 months, and another will say it's a recommendation, and the third one won't even pick it up. And yet, here we are, we're all talking about consumer credit, but it's just different sectors. It's just it's
Yeah,
it's outstanding the lack of coordination. It is the blind men on the elephant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Managing consultants is, yeah, and I think it's not only for model validation. Yeah, but back to so we mentioned ongoing performance monitoring, right?
Right.
So part of the validation report is basically looking at the plan for PM, right? And let's say, for argument's sake, you have a pricing model, okay, and let's say it's options, so you have some kind of volatility surface or volatility cube, right?
Right.
And every once in a while, you have to, you're pricing something that's like far out of the money or in the money, kind of outside where you actually have observable data,
Yep.
right? So what do you do? So a good practice is you collect statistics on the model usage and you say, okay, during this month there were so many incidents
Yeah.
when I interpolated my thing a little bit far, and then you collect all these statistics, and that's all part of your OPM report. And then somebody can, even the model users can sort of pick it up and say, oh, maybe I should try collecting a little bit more implied volatility data, or maybe I just have some kind of interest rate curve where I have data until, let's say, 10 years, and I'm doing a 30-year trade, so maybe I should try to collect
Right.
30-year instead of extrapolating, right? So that's kind of it's a better practice, right? Whereas if you just have a time series of OPM results that says pass, 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 every day for the last 10 years, that kind of doesn't Well, I mean, it tells you that you passed, but it doesn't really have the KRIs where you can sort of look at trends and see that a problem is coming and maybe something is deteriorating, right? And you could have fixed
Right.
it in time, right? Like
Right.
you basically want to catch the fail before it actually fails.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm an American-raised kid, so I think about it in terms of cars. You know, how do you know that there's something that you obviously don't want to have your brakes fail when you're going down a mountain
Mhm.
in Yosemite or on California Route 1 or something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So how do you safeguard against something like that? I do talk about in the reverse stress, it's something like the oil gauges or the temperature
Mhm.
and so on.
Exactly. You want that for models, yeah, right? So, and basically all models, not just machine learning models, are very data dependent. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. But the point is like the data that you collect from your PM should be a lot more than just a Boolean pass fail. Right. So yeah, so things like where you don't have the right market data is definitely a statistic you want to collect. Another one which is actually very useful for pricing models, since we're talking mostly about pricing models here, is you calculate all these risk measures, all these deltas and gammas and cross gammas. And if you just do, a Taylor expansion, if you sort of see how much of the PNL these things explain, uh, that actually is a good predictor of whether something is breaking in the model,
Mhm.
right? And it's not hard to implement. I mean, just a Taylor. So if you say that, yeah, I want some kind of alarm bell if the unexplained PNL is greater than some threshold. Yeah, sometimes you sort of catch problems before they actually start killing you. Mhm.
That makes sense. Yeah,
So that's
it's
kind of
all good.
good thing to
No,
have in any OPM for a model with the results of material.
um, yeah, so I guess most of this is pretty standard. I'm still, oh, I mean, number four is probably, just the interaction between the model, at least at Jeffries, it seemed like it was difficult to get things like how do you really accept that the model has been updated? You did your MVR, you pointed out that there's something that has to be changed. So there's the
Mhm.
mechanics of pushing them to do it, but then there's the evaluation of whether they actually did what you said, especially when you're working with, like we said, something that's uh, in some error prone, in some complicated way, not really in the institutional memory.
Mhm.
Maybe they didn't fix it at all, but yet, maybe there's
Mhm.
pressure to pass it. I don't know how you
I don't know. I mean, my,
I-
my experiences with the city with change control have been, uh, yeah, it's we had one incident where IT guys basically decided to change some Java code,
right.
and
They broke something else or
yeah. And
yeah,
they broke a lot of things because they basically decided uh, to change it only on a very small subset of the use cases which we used, right? And a lot of other things got broken, and basically we didn't find out about it until things broke in production. So yes, that actually happened more than once. But the point is that it's more like a just a change control, software engineering kind of thing. It's not specific to even to models. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely broken.
right.
At,
But even the
uh,
develop, I mean, even let's say a developer, not a programmer, can do something stupid like insist on a floor, like a zero interest rate floor,
oh
which
yeah, oh
means
yeah,
that
exactly.
instead of
Yeah.
sending warnings every time you cross the origin, they're
Mhm.
just, oh, well, then I don't really need to see it. Or I'll always add one basis point or something to make sure that, I've seen that.
I've
Like
seen
in
it too. Yeah, I actually came across an example of that again at City. Somewhere deep in the code, it basically said if a discount factor is greater than one, then it's one.
right.
And it wasn't documented, and it was basically blowing up with negative interest rates in places like Japan and Brazil, way back. Yeah, yeah. Or right, yeah. Or another example where someone decided that correlations should be more than 0.99.
They
They
should
took
be, or they should not be. They should be
they should
capped.
not be. Yeah. So they kept correlations at 0.99.
Yeah,
Even when I was feeding it correlations of 0.9999,
right,
people kept.
right.
Yes, that was
It's
uh,
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy, but that's more like a software thing. It's not like
Right, right.
really model specific. Yeah.
No, no, there are always things like that. We had to debug. I was when I was a graduate student, it kept breaking. I was doing a very sensitive kind of spline fit, and I picked the points. This
Hmm.
is the spectrum of a star, and it
Hmm.
kept breaking, and nobody else could break it but just me. It's
Hmm.
because I was doing a lot of points, and it ended
Hmm.
up it was written in Fortran. I mean, I was
Hmm.
doing this in Berkeley, but my advisor had come over from Caltech and they had all these garbage Fortran programs. They also, you think about Caltech as being like a monastery. Like I can't think of a woman off the bat. It's just like all male geeks, whatever. Very smart, but
Hmm.
uh, anyway. But so it turns out that they had put in a greater than sign when they wanted a greater than or equal sign.
Ah,
And so if you had 2 points which are almost right on top of each other, it would crash.
well.
Same X value or very close in X,
Mhm. Mhm. Very interesting. Yeah. Well, I have a similar war story from City. Yeah, which is kind of dependent on model. So I had a process where I had a bunch of observations and I was fitting a curve through those using a very simple parametric curve, something like alpha times e to the minus
Yeah.
lambda
Yep.
t, just solving for alpha and lambda, and I was using some kind of optimizer which
Right.
worked very nicely for this particular problem.
That's exactly the kind of problem I did. That's like in Leverburn Marquardt or simulated annealing or
Exactly.
something. Yeah.
Exactly. I ended up using LM, but basically initially I used another optimizer.
Right.
And at City, they had this huge offshore, basically IT, whatever, quant dev team, and they decided to optimize the library. And they did it in the following way. They took the optimizer I was using, they removed it from the library, and they changed the code. So when I called my optimizer, what I thought was my optimizer, it actually called a different optimizer, something like Brand, which only worked for one variable. And I was trying to optimize for two variables.
Right. Right.
It didn't tell anyone. So at some point, people who were basically using my code called me up and said, look, all of a sudden we are getting numbers which are total garbage. What's going on? What's wrong? And I tried to figure out, and it literally took me a year to find out what happened.
Yeah.
At which point, I basically just changed my code to call LM because, yeah, nobody was going to take out LM and then get the proper numbers back. But yeah, and I don't know, it's not really model risk. It's like, how do we make sure that people who are doing the coding are following the spec or not inventing something or documenting what they can? Yeah, it's not limited to models. I don't have a good answer to this. I don't
I
know,
mean,
Chris.
you also wonder how much this is driven by management or something like that. I was just telling my son, who has not read Solzhenitsyn, he's never read The First Circle, but I love that scene where the commissars come in and they have to see a portable phone working.
Hmm.
The scene, and so that they work out ahead of time some sort of pantomime, so that the guy behind the glass, he imagines hello, so that there
Hmm.
is a real conversation, and that passes.
That's a very interesting book. Yeah, that place is now a museum. It's a cryptography museum in Moscow.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I've wanted to take Russia trips, particularly. I mean, I went out with a Moskvichka, and she actually said, "Yes, you can do Moscow in a few days. You can do, I think it's called the Golden Ring, like the city of Smirnov and things like that." She said, but don't spend too much time there. Go to Leningrad, go to the Baltics. That's where you want to spend your time. So, and that's someone from Moscow saying that. So, but anyway, I haven't. The furthest east I got was, I guess, Krakow. Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. Mm, It's yeah, I might go there someplace. I was told it's very pretty, Krakow. But anyway, so
Yeah.
basically back to models. So I think yeah, it's kind of important for validation. Yeah, to focus not only that the model kind of makes sense, but yeah, it's kind of wrapped in a sort of proper uh cocoon. Yeah, and you're getting all the KRIs out and it's properly documented. In fact, the smaller institutions mostly folks deal with vendor models rather than in-house. Even I guess at the
Sure.
Jeffries, yeah,
Even Jeffries. I mean,
yeah,
Jeffries is
even Jeffries, yeah,
interior.
yeah. Jeffries has, as far as I know, lots of Murex.
And numerics. Yeah, that's basically it's Murex
Murex,
numerics, some old risk metrics, some old yeah, some Bloomberg. Yeah.
they also have quantified solutions for exotics
Right.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, but with Murex, basically, yeah, it's hard to imagine that there is a bug, inside Murex. But what happens is, people who call Murex Analytics might not be doing it correctly, might not be interpreting the results correctly. Uh, yeah, because I don't know what's inside, or QRM or whatever vendor analytics folks use. So that is kind of um, important. So if you have, for example, an in-house model, then a really good practice, unless it's very hard, is for validator to actually to re-implement the model from scratch and
Right.
see if they get the same numbers.
Your
Yeah, it
replication.
doesn't have to be like super clean code, but yeah.
Right.
Whereas with Murex, well, yeah, you don't have to re-implement everything in Murex, but you have to focus on the interfaces to your bank's systems. Like
Mhm.
what happens, for example, uh, I guess one of my favorite stories is Federal Reserve has in St. Louis has a database called FRED.
Fred, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I use it all the time. They have lots of very nice historical time series, all sorts of great stuff.
Yeah.
And one interesting feature there is, let's say you have time series, daily time series, and you have days where the data is not available for some reason. Let's say you have, for example, LIBOR, which is not available on London holidays.
Right.
And you know what they do? They put a zero there. Instead of saying, yes, there's no data, you have a zero interest rate. So if you just take it and plot it, yeah, you have all this LIBOR, zero,
Boom. Right.
LIBOR, zero, right? So you kind of, yeah, it's not documented properly, of course. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff you need to look out for when you are raping a vendor model. Did you screw up in the interface, basically?
Right. Well, I remember because I worked in numerics for a few years. That's the kind of thing that at least operationally you can kludge. Like you can say with a range accrual or something like this, give me 1 times Monday through Thursday and 3 times Friday. That works as long as Friday isn't a holiday like Good Friday.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other thing, what you said a minute ago, I thought was interesting because you broke it down into two things. You said that someone could use the model wrong, so that's certainly something.
Mm-hmm.
But how much is should at least a junior validator be told about even the reporting? Let's say even if the CRO or something wants a one pager on how is this model working. I mean, there's some uncertainty, there's some slippage between what the validator is looking at and what he actually writes. That might not be a faithful. And in SR 11.7, they talk about the reporting part, so that it's just I don't know if anyone's checking that email that he sends out, and then the consequences of that being,
Yeah.
the the CRO shuts down that desk or something just because of one bullet point. I mean, that's pretty internal risky.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I don't know the answer what the balance is because some institutions have a whole bunch of KRIs related to model risk. Okay, and things like the number of models whose
Right.
validation is past due, or the number of models actually in use that have not been validated, right? And that's another actually good point which I'll come back to later, or the number of models with deficient documentation. And you have
Yep.
all these KRIs, and if you present all these KRIs to some kind of executive committee or board, they don't know what's important or not, and they
Right.
kind of want all these numbers to be flattened. Whereas other folks kind of try to present a single number as a model risk index in a firm. So they take all these KRIs and they take some kind of a weighted, sum based on how important are the affected models, how much we use, how much money we can, lose. And the problem with that is once you have a single number, that's kind of all people care about. Okay, so if you have something which is potentially very problematic, but kind of doesn't affect the number because the weights are so low, well, yeah, nobody tries to fix it. And so I'm actually kind of inclined to say that having a single index, for model risk is a little bit counterproductive.
Right.
Because it adds too much detail. It's a bit like, you have a painting, a Mona Lisa, and you try to compress it into a single pixel. Right. Right. So it's kind of the same thing with these executive, summaries. You have to be very, very careful that you don't mislead people. Right. On the model documentation, one thing I think I mentioned it on one of these prior calls that SR 11.7 does not require, unfortunately, and should have, is just explaining how to use the model.
Yeah.
Because model documentation these days tends to be a very large document, sometimes hundreds of pages, containing all the test results and explaining why we chose to do things this way and not that way, which is all very useful, right? And just figuring out, I trust the model, it's validated. How do I just call it from my Excel spreadsheet?
Right.
It's sometimes hard, and that actually is a risk because if you don't explain to people how to use it, they will figure it out on their own and they might screw up. So having some kind,
No,
kind
absolutely.
of a
I keep ordering things from Amazon, and there's an installation manual, but there's nothing once you've actually built it. Yeah.
It's a bit like IKEA, for example, is very good at providing manuals how to use the parts to put something together. And so it's a very good practice to for model risk management policy to require that. But it's not in SR 11.
Yeah. Another thing. Yeah. Well, maybe we go 5 more minutes, and I'll give you back 10 minutes. I'll give us back 10 minutes. So the other thing I was thinking about was model risk ratings. Should they be a 1 parameter rating, a 2 parameter, a scorecard, things like that? Because it's what you said a minute ago that a lot of that is, and people are going to use that wholesale, right? They're not going to think about that, just like what you said with, well, VAR is also like that, right? What did the guy at JP Morgan, how much am I going to lose tomorrow? Give me a dollar figure, 99% confident. But the I think you cited the two most common dimensions, which are impact and usage. I mean, frequency of use, right? So, but are there other factors behind those two, or let's say that's A, B, C, D or something in inventory or what?
I think documentation definitely should be a separate dimension for model risk, because you could have because if you kind of mix it in with everything else, people won't require proper documentation for models, and that's very risky. But there's model complexity.
Right.
Okay. And again, how do you measure complexity? There are many schools of thought. It's like any other, calculation. Some people just count functional points. Some people basically say if you use, particular numerical methods, it makes things more complicated than others.
Or operationally dependence on other models. Yeah, or something.
Yes. So that's one thing. Also in terms of impact, depending on where you are, there's a dollar impact and there's a reputational risk impact.
Right.
So and it's kind of hard to put a dollar value on a reputational risk, but you might have a situation basically where your model screws up and you don't lose a lot of money, but you get a lot of bad press, which is even worse.
Sounds like Citibank for some reason.
Yes, those guys. They actually, it was in the news. FDIC didn't like the basically living will the data governance and the living will.
Right. Yeah, there was something, I didn't look through it, but there was something that came out this week separating the very top banks from the middle banks in terms of, the resolution plans, the wills and things,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
why they
well,
split that at 100. Yeah, I think it's
yeah, well,
certain.
Citi actually got it was much worse than the other large banks in the same story. Yeah, because they actually had, I believe the word was deficiency, if I'm not mistaken, which is not good, not good.
No, it's I mean, a big vulnerability, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, well, I have so many city stories. Yeah, maybe I'll write a book of memoirs about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was there for a few months. There's a small company run by some Orthodox guys called TechPar. They placed me there, but my
Mhm.
manager never spoke a word to me. And so that I was there for 3 months, and I think I did a few things. I knew some people there, so I talked to them, uh, but that was kind of a not a very memorable experience. Like a restaurant you don't want to go back to. Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, it's a strange place. But anyway, so did we, yes, in terms of model governance, so what did we not discuss? I'm trying to think. So
Well,
definitely OPM
yeah,
and
this
implementation.
right,
Mhm.
with my limited experience with model governance, just directly working it for a few months. Is any of these wrong? And am I leaving anything, obviously? Well, we talked about a lot of the things that I might also put into here, such as model risk ratings and things, but
Mhm.
and a KRI operational risk approach. But
Mhm.
is there anything that's obviously wrong here, I guess?
No, no, no. I think it's a very good slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to incorporate that and build it because I only have like a 1 or 2 page section on governance. I know
Mhm.
someone at PNC, and she said that she would look at a governance discussion and trying to get some chapters and things out by the end of the month. Just thinking that over the summer, get some feedback from you, from people, other people like that, because we're looking at December 1st, submitting 25% of the book, which is, you know, that's a made up number. That's, like 25% of what? If you hadn't written the rest of it, then
Yeah.
how do you judge? How do you prove that you delivered 25%? Right. That's impossible.
Yeah, no, yeah. Many years ago, I translated a book for Springer,
Right. Good, good,
from
good plug.
71.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was way back before we had. Yeah, so even though I was writing in LaTeX, I had to print things out and to give them paper because they weren't able to interpret the LaTeX. Now I'm sure they can. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm sure it's more high tech than it is now. Are you using LaTeX or Word, by the way?
So my dissertation is in 1990. That's the last time I really used LaTeX. I wrote in LaTeX. I know that Morgan Stanley had, I think, a fair bit of it, and Jeffries, the back office people were writing it, but they were giving you PDFs. So by
Mm-hmm.
that time, I was not, by a year or two ago, I was not sufficient that I could actually go into the source and change things. But I do remember, because I touch type, I do remember being able to go /epsilon and write
Mm-hmm.
equations with a lot fewer mistakes than in Microsoft equation. So,
Oh, yeah, I hate that thing. Yeah, yeah. No, LaTeX. Yeah, it's actually interesting. Well, that one of the responsibilities of model governance is to publish templates for various kinds of model
right,
documentation.
that's right.
Yeah, and it's
That's a
actually
key word.
interesting decision. Should you provide both Word and LaTeX or just Word?
Right, right.
How do you think?
Uh, tech word, etc. Yes, that's right. Actually, a fair amount of time that I spent was just templates and
Mhm.
just the reporting of things, even if it's the template for a UI where the
Mhm.
model governance person themselves is evaluating the model or something, because you want to make sure everything's in that and that the pull down menus for each of the inputs is complete and so on. Yeah,
Yeah. No, just like a document template, because it's one thing to have a policy saying this document needs to mention X, Y, Z,
right,
and it's another thing to have a template, like a Word document saying fill in
right.
the blanks. Here's
With an
X.
enumeration or a fleshing out or an enumeration of the things in either in bullets or yeah, that's right. That that's a key thing.
Yeah, that's kind of a good practice. So most folks actually, have templates.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So then, yeah, welcome back from California. I can tell you,
Okay.
if I didn't say this already, that my birthday is July 21st, and growing up in New York City, I always felt that it was a hot day. Last year, I looked up what the hottest day historically is in New York City, and it's my birthday.
Oh,
No question. And so then from there, then you extrapolate to my mother in 1962. I mean, we have air conditioning now everywhere. In the
mhm.
60s, we were like France for the Olympics this year. No air conditioning and no, whatever. Uh, so I can't imagine her really being in labor,
Mhm.
no air conditioning in the car, no air conditioning in the apartment. Obviously the hospital must have had something, but somebody asked me about the, the first air conditioner was built to make workers work harder, right?
Mhm. Of course.
And in a printing factory in Brooklyn by
Mhm.
Mr. Carrier. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it started here. It started here in Brooklyn, and I guess was very widely accepted in the U.S. I don't understand why the Brits and everything. Although, I do understand. You look at the map, you look at Moscow, you look at London. These cities are further north than us, but still, they have hot
Mhm.
summers. I mean that,
Yeah,
they go away. I know they go away and all that stuff, but we work all the time. Anyway, I can't live without my air conditioning. So
yeah, it's would be challenging. Yeah, but after everything, we went to Moscow. Well, before the war, obviously, 2019, and it happened to be the coldest day in 70 years.
right.
We was lucky. Well, fortunately, we had lots of warm clothes, so we actually walked around quite a bit. Not a lot of
Yeah,
other
that
people.
that was frightening to me. The public TV station ran all these foreign movies when I was growing up, and I think when I was about 10, they ran Eisenstein, they ran Potemkin, and I think that's the one with where they show the Russian winter. And
Mhm.
it's like, you know, it can't ever be this cold anywhere, can it? What is this, the North Pole? But yeah,
Yeah, well, it was minus 30 in Moscow. So we, and literally the last time it was this cold on that day of the year was during World War II, which
right.
kind of messed up Germans' plans with.
Right.
So, well, didn't mess up our travel plans, but yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, yeah, but we did have kind of lots of warm clothes and used them all. Mhm.
Yeah, we'll be there in 6 months. I understand that there are temperature perturbations in the temperate parts of the world, and so we'll be there. Or
Yeah, yeah.
Moscow might. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also all this fun stuff from climate change that people only started trying to make analytics for, and
Right.
lots of things. And yeah, I'll yeah not yeah we actually well that actually might be fun topic which I can present on how cities messed up their climate risk analytics.
Right. Well, I know that Deutsche, maybe that is a topic that I don't think we say very much about climate, but the climate change modeling, the validation of those models. I know Deutsche was looking to hire people that they do something like that, but maybe BaFin or whatever has asked them to do that. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I just go back on this, Daniel Kahneman talking about at least in the behavioral economic sense that climate change is what he calls the perfect problem, that you don't really see the effects of it, and so nobody cares, basically. So
Yeah, it's not clear. Yeah, it's definitely lots of opportunity for folks to write models that don't work.
all
Yes,
right, okay, so let's see if we can get a few more people for next week. Maybe this is a reflection of the it being end of midsummer, or not midsummer, but the start of summer, and people being away. But I'll push some people. The guy from South Africa, I don't know what's going on. He was supposed to be on last week. Then I thought maybe he meant this week. Now he's, what they say, crickets. Just I can't hear anything from him. So
I can. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I can. Since it's kind of public, I can pass on this thing to a
yeah,
few other
please, please.
folks. Maybe they'll want to join
And if
as well.
someone wants to make a spiel for like 5 or 10 minutes, then I'm happy to do that. They can
Mm.
push themselves, or they can. I think an old friend from he used to be Ernst and Young. Now he's Jeffries. Went over to the other side. So he's a very smart guy. I think he's listening. Hi, Sri John, if you're out there,
Mm. Yeah,
but
good people.
in London. Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. So have a good week. We'll be in
Okay,
touch.
see you next week.
That was
Bye.
really helpful today. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay. All
Mhm.
right. So stop the share and